Ron blessed me today by not telling me to dress casually. No, I'm teasing. Thank you for that. And no, it's great to be with you guys, and real honor for you to invite a Yankee to come here. I actually am from New York, so you're really gracious to invite me here. I know some of you are thinking, I didn't invite him. but I appreciate you being here anyway, at least for the breakfast and the fellowship. But so my wife and I are now dual U.S.-Israeli citizens. We live in Jerusalem, and hey, we have a capital now, first time in 3,000 years, so it's good. So we're excited about that. We do love, as followers of Jesus Christ, we love our Palestinian friends and neighbors, and we need to love them, and it's a challenge to be to try to build unity among the body of believers there. Try to have a meeting like this among Israeli, Jewish, Messianic followers of Jesus and Palestinian Arab believers. Historically, it's been very, very difficult to bring men, set aside the whole body, but just the men together, just to break bread and not break each other. But we're seeing progress there, and yet tensions like the embassy issue, can be very exciting for one side and very discouraging and divisive for the other side. So these are some of the challenges that we face there. Being a dual U.S.-Israeli citizen, so I'm Jewish on my father's side, and I'm Gentile on my mom's side. My dad's family were Orthodox Jews that had to escape out of Russia in 1906 when Tsar Nicholas II was fomenting this horrific wave of anti-Semitic attacks known as pogroms. This led to the murder of 60,000 Jewish people in just a short few years, the rape and the beating of many, many more Jewish people, the burning of their homes and the looting of their possessions. So, we left. We escaped. And having gotten out of anti-Semitic, fascist, Tsarist Russia in 1906, we could have settled, my family, in Poland or in Germany or in Austria or anywhere in Central or Eastern Europe thinking, okay, we are now free and we are safe because we're out of Russia. But of course, as you know, many Jewish people left Russia, settled in Central and Eastern Europe, and ended up perishing in the Holocaust. But by God's mercies, He moved us across Europe. None of my family knew Jesus as the Savior. In fact, they saw the Tsar and the Russian Orthodox Church as the leaders of the anti-Semitic attacks against them. So they had no interest in Christianity, absolutely zero. But God graciously moved them across Europe, put them on a steamship, got them to the United States, and they set up shop in Brooklyn, which is where Jewish people are supposed to live. That's how it's done. That's where my father's a first-generation American, he and his brother. And they, born and raised in Brooklyn. Now, my mom's side is totally different. I mean, could not be more different. She is English Methodist WASP, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. Her forebears came over before the I don't know, 250 years ago. She is eligible to be part of an organization known as the Daughters of the American Revolution. She's not actually part of it, but she could be. And, so... In fact, if you go back a few generations in her life, her grandparents, great-grandparents were circuit-riding, gospel-preaching Methodist missionaries. Rode on horseback all through the Northeast to share the gospel with people. So could you have two different people meeting and marrying? But it was the 60s, it was America, and they were lost. My father was an agnostic Orthodox Jew. You're like, I'm sorry, what? Yeah, he'd been raised in a very religious, very legalistic, and unfortunately hypocritical and angry home. He was a big part of that because he had a terrible relationship with his parents, and he bears a lot of that responsibility. He would tell you that, but his parents had a fair degree to it. Also, he didn't like them; they didn't like him. He didn't like his rabbi. Rabbi didn't like him. He basically wanted to get out at the age of 18 and leave, and so he moved out of Brooklyn and went to the Promised Land, La Jolla, California. And so, now I won't even tell you his whole testimony, but my mom was an agnostic Methodist. She was raised in the church, never heard the gospel, never heard that for God so loved the world that He gave His only Son, Jesus. that whosoever, a Jew like my father, a Gentile like my mother, whosoever believes in him, in Jesus, in his death on the cross to pay the penalty for the sin that we owe. The Bible says the penalty of sin is death, and so we can either pay it ourselves forever in hell with no way of escape, or we can let Jesus pay it for us. That's what John 3:16, that's what the gospel message is about. For whosoever believes in him, whoever believes in him shall not perish, die and go to hell forever with no way of escape, but shall have everlasting life. My mother doesn't remember ever hearing even that verse. Yet John 14:6, Jesus saying, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one can get to the Father except through me. She doesn't remember hearing that. And she was raised a Christian. But, as they used to say, I don't know if you guys use this expression, but, going to church doesn't make you a Christian any more than going to McDonald's makes you a hamburger. It just doesn't, you have to make that decision yourself. She didn't know it, so she was an agnostic Methodist. She was raised in a church, but she didn't know what she believed. Now, I'm not going to go through their whole story, but they met and married. I met in 64, married in 65, had me in 67. They were drifting, searching, but in 1973, my mom first, and then my father, became followers of Jesus Christ. And some people just lovingly shared the truth of the gospel with them. And my mom immediately knew that's what they'd been searching for. My father took a while because he had that little inner rabbi in him saying, they're Jewish, we don't do that. Jesus is not for us, stay away, So that didn't, it took a while. In fact, when he came to faith in Jesus as Messiah in 1973, he thought he was the first Jew since the Apostle Paul who believed this. Never heard of a Jewish person who believed in Jesus. He'd never met one, and in 1973, there weren't very many. We believe, based on the research we've all done, is that there were fewer than 2,000 Jewish people on planet Earth at that time that believed that Jesus is the Messiah. Today, a new study that we just put out, we found that there are 871,000 Jewish followers of Jesus just in the United States. Almost 900,000 just here. And the number in Israel has gone up from 23 known followers of Jesus who are Jewish in 1948, when Israel was prophetically reborn. 23, like those tables, like that, if you were all Jewish, but that's extraordinary. Like only that in the Holy Land? Today there are between 25 and 30,000 Jewish followers of Jesus. Now, in a country of 6.5 million people, okay, that's not that many, but it's a 1,000-fold increase. It took 70 years. We're a stiff-necked people. That's what the Bible says. We don't really like to listen to God. If you've read the Bible, you know we try to resist him as much as possible. This is a problem for us. And yet, the 1,000-fold increase in Israel alone, the fact that we're almost at 900,000 Jewish believers in Jesus in the United States, it's telling us that God's Spirit is moving among all people and is beginning to move among the Jewish people. And so I came to faith because I saw my parents change, and their marriage was imploding. I was a front row witness to the disaster of their marriage. But they've been married 53 years now, and it's only through Jesus that healed deep wounds that they brought into the marriage, terrible anger that they brought into the marriage, especially my father, a volcanic temper. It was not pleasant to watch, and it's not perfect now, but I saw it begin to change once they came to faith in Jesus, and it was pretty exciting. Now, you should just know that, okay, professionally, my actual professional pedigree is that I'm a failed political consultant, okay? Everyone I ever worked for, every candidate I worked for in Washington lost, bar none, 100% failure rate. Well, you laugh because that's not your resume, so that seems funny to you. I mean, bless your heart. And so I understand you can be a little snarky with people here down in Texas as long as you soften it with bless your heart. So that guy's a political moron, bless his heart, So am I wrong? I think that's the laughter of recognition. So all right, so I helped Steve Forbes, the business leader, Forbes magazine. He ran for president twice. I helped him lose both times. And in the process, he's got 5 daughters. I helped him lose about $70 million of his daughter's inheritance money. So that was not so good. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel had lost his re-election in 1999. And in 2000, he was preparing a comeback. I was on his comeback campaign team. It took him 9 years to come back. I played no useful role whatsoever. I was once on Pat Buchanan's TV show on MSNBC. They canceled it the next day. So I'm just saying that was sort of my life. So I had to get out of politics. I went through political detox. I'm out. I'm clean. Last year I needed a patch. So it was a tough year. And just so you know that my streak is continuing with being a failed, I met personally, of the 17 Republican presidential candidates, I met personally to meet with, to get to know, to advise, I think 13 or 14 of them. Guess who I did not meet with? So, okay, so just, you have a little context to me. So whatever else you hear me say, just I put my cards on the table, right? You know, just don't overstate anything. So having gotten out of politics, I thought, what am I good at? What can I do, Lord? I mean, really, I want my life to be useful. I invested 10 years of my life doing something that, bore little or no fruit. I feel like I was doing it because God told me to do those jobs, but Lord, come on. Like, for what purpose is this? And so I thought, I'm one of the few Jewish people in America, before I moved to Israel, that didn't get the financial gene. I'm not your accountant, I'm not your stockbroker, I'm not your hedge fund manager, like many of my compadres in the Jewish world. I'm not your doctor, I'm not your lawyer, I'm not your chiropractor. I don't run a Hollywood studio or, so I didn't really get the classic Jewish skill sets. That was a problem for me. And so all I knew how to do was basically make things up. There's a job for that, and it turns out to be a novelist, and that's a good thing. I tell my journalist friends, listen, guys, you want to write fake news? Don't be a journalist, be a novelist. There is a job for it, just own it already, okay? So that's what I do. I make things up for a living, and it's not been so bad. 5 million copies, almost. Right? I appreciate, Ron, you trying to drive us over the top, yeah? So we're 100,000 shy. So if you want to just, no, I'm not sure exactly where we are. My first novel was called The Last Jihad. Now, I began writing it after I finished helping Bibi Netanyahu go nowhere with his political career. Once he offloaded me, obviously he did well. He's Prime Minister of Israel now. But in January of 2001, I began writing The Last Jihad, my first political thriller. Never written a novel, never took a class on how to write a novel. In Washington, I barely had time to read novels. I actually don't like fiction that much, so sorry. But I hope that you do. But the point is, the first novel, the first page of the novel, puts you inside the cockpit of a jet plane that's been hijacked by radical Islamist terrorists. And it's coming in on a kamikaze attack mission into an American city. This is almost 9 months before September 11th, 2001. Now it happens to be a business jet, a Gulfstream 4. It's flying into Denver, not New York or Washington. I wasn't being prophetic. I was just projecting forward the way I believed radical Islamic terrorists were going to come to the United States if American leaders didn't understand that we've got to fight them there before they come here. But I was too late. On the morning of September 11th, I was actually 2 or 3 chapters from the end of finishing that first novel. It's a novel that begins with a kamikaze attack on America, but then my fictional American president decides to declare war on Iraq to remove Saddam Hussein from power. That's how the book was ending. And then all hell broke loose. Now, again, people say, U.S. News and World Report, eventually they called me a modern Nostradamus. I said, look, I'm not a clairvoyant, I'm not a psychic, I don't call Miss Cleo in the middle of the night to get my plot ideas. She was a psychic years ago, you may not know that, but she was a psychic, but somehow she didn't see the IRS coming for her for tax evasion. I don't know quite how that worked, if she was so forward-looking, but anyway, hashtag just saying. So, but that's not what I'm doing. I'm not psychic. I'm not Nostradamus. I'm I'm looking at the world as it is, and I'm saying, where is evil rising? I'm a Russian Jew. I'm a pessimist by nature. Right? I'm not proud of it. I'm just saying, I'm a glass half empty guy. And then not only is it empty, there's a crack in that glass. It's leaking. It'll be gone by tomorrow, probably by tonight. That's the way I look at the world. Again, I'm not proud of it. With the Holy Spirit, he tries to help me say, there is hope. Oh, okay. I have a Gentile, Spirit-led wife. Wonderful. She helps me say, hey, have some decaf. It's going to be okay. But fortunately, again, there's a job for that. You want to think about the worst things that could happen in the world? Become a political thriller writer. Then you can sort of channel your fears into a specific job. Now, so that's what I do. I write about things that could happen. I'm not saying they will happen. I'm saying they could happen under this premise. This is the theme of my novels. To misunderstand the nature and threat of evil is to risk being blindsided by it. Okay? On December 7th, 1941, America was blindsided by an evil coming out of Imperial Japan, Tokyo, we did not see coming. We did not think they wanted to hit us. We didn't think they could hit us. We didn't think they were trying to hit us. Then they hit us. That's the definition of being blindsided. Winston Churchill was warning Great Britain, Europe, America for a decade of the 30s. Adolf Hitler, this is the guy, keep your eye on him. He's an evil, he is rising. We're disarming, he's arming. We've got to take this seriously. We've got to stop this guy. Nobody listened. If you haven't seen the new movie, Darkest Hour, the Academy Award-winning movie, see it. Fascinating. Take your kids to see it. Think about it as men, as leaders. We have got to be able to see evil rising against our families, against our nation, against the free world, and make sure that we take action. It doesn't always mean military action, but it does if we wait too long. 9/11, we didn't see the evil coming from Al-Qaeda. In retrospect, we can say, there was a lot of signs leading up to it. We did not connect the dots. You read the 9/11 Commission report, what was the central conclusion of that report? The central conclusion was, this was not a failure of intelligence, it was a failure of imagination. That was the conclusion of all the commissioners that analyzed all the data. It's not that we didn't know all these facts. We couldn't imagine that somebody would do something like turning civilian aircrafts into missiles and killing themselves as well as everybody on it. Now, I was able to imagine it, and I told you I'm not that bright, but I believe in evil. I'm not for it. I'm against it. Just to be clear. But I think maybe it's partly being Jewish, but also being a follower of Jesus. Looking at the scriptures, over 800 times in the Bible, the word evil is mentioned. The Bible teaches us that there's not just a force of God in this world. There's a force of evil. These are opponent forces. They're not equal, but they are opposite. And if we do not see evil, if we do not understand evil, it will blindside us. So I write these political thrillers, and my main reason for writing them is to thrill you. I mean, they are thrillers. If I don't do that, you're not going to read them. You might not read them anyway. But the goal is to keep you up all night until around 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. You start cursing me on Twitter, on Facebook, however you can reach me. Cursing me, because now you've got to get up for work in a half an hour, and you've been up all night reading. That's my objective. If I can get you to curse, I mean, you personally probably wouldn't curse, but you'd say, "You're an idiot," bless your heart. You'd find a way. You'd find a way. And it's been happening for the last 10 days since this novel released. The Kremlin Conspiracy, the new novel. And, because I write these chapters, they're small, they're intense, they're cliffhangers. They're short chapters. They're like Pringles. You can't eat just one. So it's 2 o'clock in the morning, you're like, I got a big presentation in the morning, just, how's it gonna, maybe just, all right, this was a short chapter, I'll just read one more, and then suddenly it's 5:30 in the morning, like, come on. That's, now I'm doing my job. If your blood pressure isn't going up, I am not doing my job. People do not have the time, discretionary time or money to waste on a book that doesn't do anything for them. But I'm going to take you on a high-speed roller coaster ride into the heart of darkness. You're going to go to places you don't really want to go, but you wouldn't go there anyway. But the goal is to take you. But it's not just to thrill you. It's to educate. It's to warn about things that could happen if our leaders aren't serious, aren't focused, how we could get blindsided. But there's also a spiritual journey in these books. And I share the gospel. It may not be the whole thing in one book. Sometimes it is. But it has to be organic to the story. If it feels like you're getting thrown out of the story because now Joel wants to tell you about Jesus, that's not going to work. I've got to be able to write to hold an audience, not just you all, but world leaders are reading my books. And I've got to be able to hold their attention and still give them a spiritual journey that the book is so intrinsically, the gospel message is so tied into the story, you can't skip that part without missing the whole point of the story. And I got to pull you through it. Now, I do that through a lot of assassinations, car chases, and explosions. People are dying in these books. So that's sort of how I hook you and hold you. If it slows down, I kill somebody, fictionally speaking, So King Abdullah of Jordan, 2 years ago, picks up one of my novels. Actually, an aide gave it to him. And the thing about this particular novel was, it was a novel about ISIS trying to assassinate him and overthrow his kingdom. He's a character in the book, King Abdullah of Jordan, a named character. Now that's risky. If you're a U.S. Israeli citizen, by the way, I as a dual citizen, so I get both passports, and I get to vote twice. It's like living in Chicago. So that's exciting. You don't even have to be dead to vote twice. So anyway, that's a diversion. But the point is, if you're a U.S. Israeli citizen, if you're Jewish and an evangelical follower of Jesus and a Zionist, meaning you believe that God has given the Jewish people a right to come back to our homeland, even though you love Palestinians, you love Arabs, but you believe we have a right to be there and live safely, and you write a novel about people trying to kill an actual king that lives, he's your next door neighbor, like that, you might get banned from the kingdom forever. But what happened was he read the book in 2 days, and rather than banning me, he invited my wife and me to come and visit him in his kingdom for 5 days. And a luncheon with him. He took me and my wife to a live fire military exercise. They were training their special forces units how to fight ISIS. Fascinating. Last night I was there. He invited us to a private dinner, 2.5 hours in his private palace with just a few of his close personal friends. We built a friendship. I've seen him 5 times in the last 2 years, including he invited me to bring a delegation of evangelical Christian leaders to meet with him in November. And I got to take 2 of my 4 sons, 21 and 19, sort of tagged on that trip, and they got to have lunch with the king in a palace in Amman, as we spent time talking about the issues and how evangelicals can build relationships with Muslims. We're not going to agree on everything, but how do we build a friendship? How do we show them love and honor and understand, especially when you have a moderate fighting radical Islam? How do we encourage that? President El-Sisi and his staff has been reading my novels. I got invited to meet him. I got invited to come meet him in Cairo and bring a delegation. We were supposed to spend an hour with the president of Egypt. We ended up spending 3 on a 5-day trip. It was extraordinary. God is just opening up these crazy doors. Vice President Mike Pence is a fan of these novels. I met him when he was a member of the House of Representatives. He and his wife Karen were fans of the novels. They reached out to us. Would you like to have lunch? I'm like, sure. I didn't know he was going to become the Vice President of the United States. Last week I was in Nashville at a luncheon that he was speaking at, a private lunch about this size. And he saw me, comes over, gives me a hug, and says, where's the new novel? So this is exciting. Mike Pompeo. I met him when he was on the House Intelligence Committee. He'd been a fan of the novels. I didn't know him, and I didn't know he was going to become the CIA director, and apparently now the Secretary of State. What happens when you write a thriller is you just hope that your mother can find it at a bookstore within 100 miles of her house. That's your objective. Yeah, selling 5 million copies is exciting. Reaching world leaders is exciting. But, you're just trying to do something with your life given all your previous failures. And the reason I say that is because none of that may apply to your specific life, but I just want to encourage you. You need to ask the Lord what unique sets of skills and talents you have to reach your sphere of influence with the gospel, and ask, Lord, I don't want to just be useful to reach men and families in my little world. If you would expand that world even a little, okay, maybe it's not going to be, what Joel's doing, but maybe it's more. Maybe it's more strategic. You may reach the one guy in Grapevine who's going to become a global CEO, or is going to become, a world leader, or who has access to one, and is going to take the gospel on to them. We've got to be faithful to where we are, but not think of ourselves in a small universe, in a corner of the world. I come from a little town of 5,000 people in upstate New York, and I never expected this. Now, my current novel, I'm just going to give you a little teaser on this, and then take a few questions if we've got a little bit of time. So the current novel is called The Kremlin Conspiracy. When I was in the West Wing a couple months ago, meeting with the vice president, again, we've been friends for years, and we've talked about a lot of issues, and he invited me and my wife to come and spend some time with him alone in the West Wing, and we covered all of our ground, and then he said, so when's the next novel coming out, and what's it called? So, Vice President, I really hesitate to say. Train coming through? That was. So, okay. So I said, well, I'm a little hesitant to say the title here in the West Wing. He said, why? It's a little uncomfortable. It's nothing personal. It has nothing to do with any of the allegations swirling around this building. I'm just, he said, what are you talking about? Well, I don't really, what is the name of the novel? Mr. Vice President, it's called The Kremlin Conspiracy. And I've known him for a long time. I've never seen him laugh so hard. And I'm guessing the president doesn't want to be seen walking out to Marine One with a copy, but I think he should still do it. I'm not saying he's guilty. I'm just saying there's all these allegations. So, I hope and pray that he's not guilty, obviously. But I think if he just tweeted about it, I would, he could denounce me. I'm okay with that. Just denounce the book, denounce me. That would really sell a lot of copies. That would be good. Or praise me and say, oh, that's fabulous. Everyone should read this. The point is here, look, The Kremlin Conspiracy is designed, it's a thriller. It's designed to tell the story of a dictator rising in Russia who, while a new American president is focused on North Korea and Iran, this dictator is preparing the most brazen attack of his life. His gamble is that he's got 100,000 Russian troops massed on the border of NATO, and his theory is he wants to go invade one of the small, lightly armed neighbors in the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. Most of us can't find it on a map, but these are three small countries. They were under Soviet slavery for 70 years, but they're very proud, strong, wonderful people, but they're terrified that Putin's coming after them. And Putin has threatened to come after them, so there's fewer than 5,000 NATO forces spread out in the three countries, and there are very few U.S. forces there. We've got forces in Poland, but we don't have many in the Baltics. And the danger in the novel is that my Russian dictator, Alexander Luganov, he's not Putin. Let's call him Putin-esque, okay? And if he actually did this, if he went and did this lightning-fast grab, experts believe that Putin in real life could grab 1, 2, or maybe 3 of the Baltics in 96 hours. That's the plot. And if he did it, why would he do? Why would you invade 1, 2, or 3 actual NATO members, right? Because they are protected under what's known as Article 5. This is the center of the Mutual Defense Pact, which says if one country in NATO is attacked, every member considers it attack against themselves, and they all come to the rescue. That's because every country is too small, except for the United States, to defend against Russia. But if we band together, we can protect ourselves. That's the theory. That's the principle. But the gamble that Luganov is about to take is, if I go grab one of those countries, or several, in 96 hours, is the United States is NATO really going to go to a full-scale conventional war with Russia that could escalate very rapidly into a nuclear war? And his gamble is, no, they won't do it. I will grab it, they will say, oh, that's terrible, they'll pass some sanctions, and nothing will happen. But if that's true, if we really didn't protect and rescue these countries, my friends, that is the end of the NATO alliance. You can't have a mutual defense pact if you don't actually defend anybody. And so in 96 hours, Luganov thinks, I could just collapse the entire Western alliance. Now, when I began writing the Kremlin conspiracy 2 years ago, I thought, well, for the purpose of a thriller, that's a good hook. I can, if I tell people it's about Estonia, they may not read it. But if I talk about the threat Russia could pose to the entire alliance, the idea that the day after the collapse of the alliance, the leader in Moscow would be the most powerful man on the planet to whom everyone would have to come and kiss his ring, all right, that's a good premise for a novel. But now, every day since it's released, it feels like we're getting closer to the possibility that it could really happen. The Lithuanian ambassador from one of the Baltic countries contacted me, asked for me to have breakfast a week ago Friday. I was having breakfast with him in Washington, D.C. Why? Because officials in Vilnius, his capital, had heard about the novel and said, go meet with this guy and find out what he's talking about. Is he with us? Is he against us? Go meet with him. And so we did. And now he sent copies of the book back to Vilnius. He's sharing copies of the books with the other ambassadors from the other countries. And he knows that I am trying to raise the alarm. There's going to be a summit on April 3rd between the 3 Baltic leaders and President Trump. We need to pray. We need to pray that our leaders, and particularly our new president, who doesn't have a lot of experience in foreign policy, like none, that he has the wisdom and he draws from the people around him, which are excellent people. Pence, Pompeo, Mattis. I mean, look, the president's been hit as being weak on Russia, and I think that's mostly because he's radio silent on Putin. He will tweet about anybody, Rocket Man. He's tougher on Jeff Sessions than he is on Vladimir Putin, okay? That's got to change. But if he was really criminally corrupt, I don't see it, but if he was criminally tied into Putin, why would you put Jim Mattis at the Defense Department? The guy was the supreme allied commander of NATO. Why would you increase U.S. defense spending as much as Trump is doing? Why would you push NATO to spend more on their own defense, which they're doing? So he's doing. Why would you send lethal defensive arms to Ukraine so they can defend themselves against Russia? You wouldn't if you were criminally tied into Putin. But there's something weird going on there, and I don't know what it is. The fact that the president pulls his punches on Putin when he doesn't pull his punches on anybody, that's a concern. But we can pray for our leaders. That's what the Apostle Paul tells us to do. We need this guy to get it right. If you want to vote him out in 4 years, fine. But he's the president of the United States. He's the commander-in-chief right now. And we have a very volatile world, the most dangerous moment in the world since World War II. And we need our leaders to keep us safe, defend ourselves and our allies. So that's what I'm writing. I really don't know how to do anything else. I think I've made that clear. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But the goal, ultimately, is to share the gospel. And not just share the gospel. I'll close with this thought. But if you read it, you're going to get the gospel. And maybe you already know the gospel, so you're fine. But it's the type of book you could give to a guy in your office or whatever in your family, in your neighborhood, and say, hey, I heard this guy, New York Times bestselling author, and he wrote this interesting book, and I'm going to give you this copy. Let's get coffee, and I'd love your take on it. Because you can get them in a spiritual conversation. You're basically giving them a gospel tract that just happens to be disguised as a New York Times best-selling political thriller. It will hit the Times list this Sunday. So that gives you a little context of who I am. And let's take a few questions if you have any.